you want to change your practice area. In the recruiting world, we call this retooling your practice. Some retools are viable and others are extremely challenging to pursue. Timing, pedigree, and market conditions, they all affect the viability of your retool. So we're going to start with timing. So retools are viable when they're done earlier in your career, so in your first and third year as an associate. And as you become more senior, the likelihood of retooling your practice, it does shrink. Why is this the case? When you retool your practice, you're likely to take a class cut because your skill set, it's not really directly transferable into what you're trying to do. So the more senior you are, the more dramatic and drastic your class cut needs to be. And firms, typically, they're not usually open to class cuts that exceed 1 to 2 years. So if you're interested in retooling your practice, please don't wait too long to do that. Try to do it as a junior associate and try to do it between your first and your third year. So retools are also affected by market conditions. If the market is tight and we're operating in kind of a slow or maybe a recessionary climate, a retool becomes less viable. This is because the supply of lawyers with an on-point skill set likely exceeds demand, and firms, they don't really need to retool someone to fill that role. On the flip side, in a hot market, that's when potentially there's more work than a group knows what to do with. And in that environment, retools become more viable. So in a hot market, firms, they potentially might be turning away work because of insufficient group staffing. And this is when the retools become more viable because the groups, they need smart people, capable lawyers, people who can get up to speed quickly. And they want to make sure that they get properly staffed up and quickly so that they're not turning away work. So these firms, they are likely to train retool candidates, and they might be willing to do this, but the person still needs to have a very strong pedigree, and they still need to be open to a classier cut. The stronger your pedigree, the more viable your retool. So if you graduated from a top law school, or maybe you graduated at the very top of your class, and you're currently working at a well-regarded or elite law firm platform, then you have the kind of branding that's going to open the door for you for a viable retool. The less prestigious your law school, the less prestigious your law firm, the more challenging the retool will become for you. So it's important to really think about which retools are actually viable with that in mind. So retools are most viable when your practice is somehow related to what you're trying to retool into. So for example, if you're a corporate generalist and a portion of your practice is M&A and capital markets, a realistic retool would be to either specialize and do exclusively M&A or to specialize and do exclusively capital markets. Another example of a realistic retool, let's say you're a finance lawyer. It's probably extremely difficult for you to retool into something that's non-finance related. But you can pursue niche practice areas in finance, like project finance or leveraged finance or structured finance, maybe restructuring or direct lending or transportation finance, because you have some familiarity with like the underlying credit agreements and some of the core skills that might be directly transferable. Another example of a realistic retool, let's say you're an IP litigator. You might be interested in pivoting to an IP transactional practice. And some firms might be open-minded to that because your experience as an IP litigator with that client base might be useful in an IP transactional practice. However, moving from corporate to litigation or from like litigation to corporate or any practice that's not at all related to what you're doing, that's when the retool becomes a lot less viable. So when you're trying to retool into a space, think critically about whether or not you have some kind of nexus to it. If you don't, it's going to be an uphill battle for you. So some conclusions, with all of this said, it's important to know that retooling your practice is very hard, and when you're in law school, when you are a summer associate, please give significant consideration to your practice area. Where do you want to be, in 5 to 10 years from now? What practice area is going to help you achieve those long-term aspirations? Which practice area is most aligned to your interests and your passions? Giving critical thought to this early in your career, especially during law school, it can help you avoid a retool, and that would definitely be best. Because retools are challenging to pursue, as I mentioned. So it's better to just make that right choice from the outset of your career. But retools are not impossible. You just need to make sure that you're considering timing, pedigree, market conditions, and the viability of the practice area you're trying to retool into in your thought process. Thank you, everyone.